Okay, class, I promised you a quick summary code walkthrough type, a really Docker walkthrough of networking. This is a repeat of what I did in class, but putting it in video format so you have an ability to kind of pause with it, work along with it, um, and go through it a bit more slowly because I know it's pretty fast when I'm up there in front of the classroom on the monitors. In any event, what you see in front of you is my terminal window. I've listed out the set of images I have, the current containers, which you can see I'm not running any containers right now, as well as a set of networks. These are the same things I had when I was up in front of you in class. Some reminders. Remember in the Docker network particularly that you see here, that there's always a default bridge network. That bridge network is there automatically, and when you initially create a container from an image. Let me do that. Let's do a Docker container run. I'm going to name it to delete, so I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to map ports here. I'm going to map 8089 to 8080. I'm going to not indicate a network right now because we're going to see by default it's going to go on that bridge network. I'm going to use Tomcat here. Give it a second, comes back, starts showing me all the log messages. It started up. I go over here, you can see I'm on port 8089, but nothing's running. Now something's running, so my Tomcat is running and so forth. I did not run in detached mode. So when I do an ls here, it's not running. Let me do that again and add the proper detached mode, which I like to kind of indicate first. Remember, we have detached interactive. I didn't specify either one, so it just starts spitting the output to the screen. And then when I control C exited, it exited the running container. So the container stopped. If I did an ls-a, you would have seen it. Oh, and I'm using the same tag, so I can't do that. So let me just call it something obvious like to delete 2. All right, it gives me that container ID now. So remember, I can inspect the container. Docker container, let me spell it right. Inspect, and I can just use A91 there for my ID, and I get some information there, including the networks it's on, right? It by default is added to that bridge network. When I looked at the set of networks again, so that's what the default bridge is. Remember what a bridge network is, what a bridge concept is in networking. It's creating its own subnet and right, you can see your own subnet. It's got its own kind of in-software gateway or router. It has its own IP address. What it doesn't have is a DNS service, as we talked about, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But it is bridge networked over through your host. So I can get to the outside world, right? That's why I can do installs of software and so forth. I can still get through on my laptop out to the world, but I get to it by having a bridged network onto the host network. Okay, it's like you put a router there in between the two and then said, oh, I'm going to send all my traffic out to the laptop, which then sends it out and sends it back to me. That's different, for example, than looking at this host network concept. If we do the host network, your container runs directly on the network services of the laptop. There's no intermediate level. There's no gateway there like the bridge. So if you ran with host networking, you would be taking up the same port numbers as if you were running on a host. Like when you run your Tomcat locally on 8080, if you spun up a Tomcat container, you're going to have a port conflict because it's using the same network. It's going to be using the same ports. Now we're mapping ports, right? We're doing port mapping from the bridge over to the host network, which is why I have to do this, right? -P on here to map 8089 to 8080. Okay, so that's how that works. Let me clean up after myself real quick. I'm going to do a Docker container remove of 2 delete and 2 delete 2. Actually, I'm going to even be more aggressive than that. I'm going to add a -F for force. So I'm going to kill those things with termination. I have my ls, I have my networks. If I try and do a Docker, remember I can do a Docker container inspect. Well, not a Docker container inspect. I can do a Docker network inspect as well on the bridge network, right? And we don't see any containers here because there it is, it's empty, right? Because I just deleted the containers. That to delete isn't there anymore. So in any event, I'm back to square one. Like I mentioned before, when we do Docker networking, we want to set up our own subnet, if you will. We typically use our own network to do that. So I already have this network test net on here. Right now, it doesn't have any containers on it either. Notice how its gateway and the subnet address part right here, right? .20 is different than this bridge network part, right? Which is 17, okay? Which would be different than, say, the host network, right? And actually, if you look, the host network on inspect doesn't have that subnet IP, right? Because it's running directly on your host. That's what it's bridging to. It's the representation of the physical network stack on your laptop, and that's why the inspect comes out with different information. But it also has no containers running on it. Okay, so let's say I want to create a new network. Docker network -- create, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to call it to delete net because I don't want this one sticking around. Right? Let's see. What option did I not have on there? Connect, create. I do have. Oh, I used an option. I should have just had it as a command. Silly of me. Right? And it created that, and it gave me the same kind of hashed identifier for it, which means I can go back to the Docker network inspect and use that hash, or I can use just to delete net. If I can spell it right. All right, and boom, I got another one. This one's .19, right? It's a different subnet again. And if I do my Docker network ls, right, to delete net's out there. Now notice the default type, which is listed under driver, right? The driver type of the network is a bridge network, just like our default bridge network and the other bridge network I've created. I've created a couple other ones before. Okay, I don't want to really get into what the null network is. Well, it's really just the same thing as your loopback interface on your laptop. So on Windows, you can do an IP config /all. On Windows or on Unix boxes, including Mac, you can do an if config -a, and this is the list of all my networks running on. The network interfaces available on my laptop, and what we're saying is that none null is the logical equivalent of the loopback interface LO0 here, which is what localhost is, which is what localhost binds to 127.0.0.1. Okay, so hopefully you understand all this part about networking already. Notice I got this bridge network running. So in any event, I want to go back to talking about Docker networking. I have these networks. Now I want to take and put a container. So I'm going to go create another container. Let's go back to delete too, right? And so I want to say I want to run this, excuse me, on one of the networks I've created instead of putting it on that default one. So I'm going to use -- network, and I'll put to delete container on the to delete _net. Okay, it comes back and says fine, right? I have a running container now. Oh boy, I'm having a hard time typing today. I'm up 7 seconds, right? My Tomcat will still be around. And then I can create my second container. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to put on the same network. Now I have to map to a different port. I can't map to 8089 because I'm already doing that. Let's see, I called that thing to delete 2, so let's go back to just to delete, right? I'm going to create a second instance. Okay, so now I got 41D. If I go look here, I got 2 running containers, and now I can go back and inspect containers, right? I have to delete. And notice I have the network ID, which if I do a Docker network ls, we'll see that corresponds to delete net, right? That's the network that I'm on. And similarly, I'll see that to delete 2 is on the same network. And in fact, I can go do an inspect of that network. Network inspect of to delete net. right? And I have two containers running because that's where I put both of them on. Now again, the point of this, right now I'm just running two separate Tomcats. The point is if I put them on subnets together, it's as if they're running on their own local network, which means they are locally addressable. And because I created that as a bridge network using the network option on the command line, I should have the ability to have the machines talk to each other. So how do we try and do that before, right? We did a Docker container exec. So I'll do an exec command. So I want to execute some command in interactive terminal mode. I could do a bash shell, or I could do a well. Let's see. Let's just do a bash shell. Container exec. What am I missing here? Docker exec container. I can tell what container I need to run that in. Hello. Let's go to delete. Now I have a bash shell, right? So now I'm even though I see this in terminal on my laptop, remember I'm now in an interactive terminal in the container. So I should be able to do the ping command back out to delete 2. And I can, right? And it even resolves the IP address, right? It's saying 64 bytes from 172.19.0.2, right? And when I went back up here to delete 2, this is on the network, that is in fact its IP address. So I have a local subnet-oriented DNS. And again, the importance of that is I can now create services on this named network, and I can say that if I want to talk, let's say, to an API or some way I need a network address of the other service in order to talk to whatever it is, I can now use a stable host name for it, presuming, right, I'm setting up my compose, or I'm setting up my script, however I'm creating the network. I'm setting it up such that I'm using the name, and the name will always resolve to the right IP, right? Because if I go back and set this all up all over again, I can't guarantee the 2 delete 2 will be this IP address. It could be something. It could be 172.19.0.8. It could be maybe the next time I put it on a different network, and it's not even 172.19. It's on the subnet IP has changed, right? By using the name and having the name resolved to an IP address, that way I'm using a service, if you will, just like you use on the internet every day when you go to websites and the like. I'm using that DNS to provide that location independence, and instead I'm alias to that logical name, and therefore my services are more robust. I don't have to go and rewire IP addresses every time I spin up containers, which, that's not what containers are. Containers are supposed to fire them up and they run, and they find the other services they're supposed to use. Okay, so that's again a repeat of the basics of Docker networking, and the kind of thing that I expect you to be able to do on Lab 5.